Daybreak is a cooperative game co-designed by Matt Leacock, and so clearly when we hear the words cooperative and Matt Leacock in the same word, in the same sentence, we think of pandemic. And this game has some points of contact with pandemic, but not many really. I would say just the general script that the player or players will take actions every turn to try to mitigate and or possibly resolve an increasingly terrible situation, and then the board will try to destroy you, and then you repeat that again. Your actions, board trying to destroy you, and you see who achieves their goals, you or the board. The game is about global warming, so each player will represent a country or group of countries with emissions, and you will take actions try to reduce the amount of emissions that you produce each turn, and also trying to increase the number of trees and of oceans, or at least ocean tokens, that will absorb carbon. The general idea is this. Again, you will take your actions, then at the end of each turn, your personal board will generate a number of carbon tokens that will be placed on that band up there. After that, when that is done, the carbon can be absorbed by trees and oceans on the board. And so, for example, this is the carbon that I have produced. The 5 trees absorb that. This is absorbed there. And these 4 cubes, these 4 oceans would only absorb 4 of my cubes. And the remaining 2 are placed here on the thermometer. Now, each box in the thermometer takes 5 cubes, and when there are 5 in a box, well, you start filling up the other box, of course. What else? Now, if you're playing with 4 players, when all 4 boxes in a line are full, you take one of these bands here and you place it there, showing that the temperature of the planet just increased. If you're playing with 3 players, only 3 boxes per line, per row are necessary. With 2, only 2. If you're playing solo, well, each time that one of these is filled, you get a temperature band. With the temperature bands, those will trigger increasing in negative effects. They will trigger the number of crisis cards that need to be resolved each round, and also the number of times that you will roll a die that will generate negative effects on the board. As you can see, there are several tracks here indicating bad stuff like ocean acidification or the thawing of the permafrost, and so on and so forth. Desertification, dieback of the Amazon, changes in weather patterns. You will roll again this die a number of times each turn, move that token, and when the corresponding token reaches one of these spaces with a tipping point, you will trigger a negative effect. These are some of the main concepts relating to the board. Each player, as I mentioned, also has a personal board, which is this one here. Your personal board has spaces where you will place tokens. The combination and number is indicated on your personal player aid. I just set up here the solo game because that's all I need to show you the game, and I'll probably play a solo game after I'm done filming this segment and before I film the conclusions. And so you'll know how much energy you need at the beginning. This is how much energy your communities require, how much dirty energy and how much clean energy you produce, and also how many and what kinds of emissions you are producing. Down here, you have places to store social, ecological, and infrastructure tokens that will help you mitigate some of the negative effects from the crisis cards. And here, alas, we have a place where we place tokens representing communities in crisis. When we start having too many, there will be a penalty to the number of cards that we can draw each turn. That's pretty tragic. And also, if this area is ever fully filled up, then we lose the game. We also lose the game if we fill up that with the temperature bands. We also fill the game if we haven't saved the planet by the end of turn 6. So how do we win the game? Well, excellent question. We win the game if, after we place carbon emissions there, and then we place them, we check if the environment is able to absorb them. If after that indeed the environment is able to absorb them all, and there is at least one of these absorbing tokens that has not been used, so at least one in excess, you reach the drawdown state. This is the other side of the turn marker, so you flip it that way to indicate that now your emissions are indeed in the negative, which is precisely what you want. If you achieve that and you survive until the end of the turn, meaning until you survive one more crisis phase, that's the best stuff at the end of the turn, that is how you win the game. Now, the script of the turn is somewhat elaborate. In truth, the main point is that you're going to have a phase where you will be playing cards, and that is the heart of the game, and then a couple of upkeeping phases. We start by adding crisis cards to this area as indicated again by the number next to the temperature band that we have there. One of them will be added face up, so the players know what that will be, and the other ones will be placed face down. And some of these cards will allow you to tuck player cards underneath to mitigate their effect. A lot of these cards will force you to take communities in crisis tokens on your personal board that will have effect that can be mitigated by these tokens that they showed you earlier. And well, there is all sort of table stuff. I don't want to give you spoilers. You'll enjoy it. You'll figure it out. On the plus side, after we add crisis, we look at the global projects. There is a deck of global project cards. You draw 2 of them each round, at the beginning of each round, and the player or players look at them and they choose which one they want to activate. There can be up to 4, so if you already have 4 there, you will need to discard one. These are all good effects. Sometimes you need to tuck a card underneath to activate that effect. Some of the times players need to have a certain combination of symbols in their play area, but these are all positive effects, and so we are preparing for the best stuff that happens. Then we get to what I described as the heart of the game. Each player draws 5 cards from here. The number of cards you draw can be modified by effects that you have that maybe will give you some extra cards. Can also be modified negatively by having too many communities in crisis on your player board. And I just want to show you some of the art, which I find very charming and very inspiring. So we draw, let's say that we draw a standard of 5 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Every player draws their 5 cards, and then, well, we're going to start playing them. There are no defined turns. Everybody can play at the same time, but players can and should discuss and coordinate. You start with 5 cards that are placed on top of your personal player board, and the fact that you can have up to 5 cards or stacks, we'll see what that means, is indicated by these slots here. So these cards will allow us to do different things. Say this card allows me to, if I discard a card, I can add 2 infrastructure defensive tokens per symbol like that in that stack and give it to any player. But it requires this much. So there are also the requirements. This one allows me to draw 8 and then keep all cards that have this kind of symbols again in the stack in which it is. This one, I can increase my requests for electricity, but that for electricity, yes, but also reduce emissions from buildings, reduce emissions from building. And I can do it once per round, each round once per symbol in the stack. Let me show you what that means. The idea is this: you have your cards and you can play them. As I said, there are no turns. Players can go at the same time. They can wait to see what other people do. There can be effects that allow them to give each other cards. But the general idea is that you're going to play your cards in one of several possible ways. You've already seen the fact that you may tuck cards under global projects to activate them, and you may tuck cards under some crisis cards to reduce their damage. Or you can play a card on top of a stack that you already have, so that only the tags of the cards in that stack are visible. And that's why if I play that card right there and then I activate that action, remember, each round I can do this once per lightning bolt. Now I can do that twice. And then suppose that there is another action that allows me to do something else with some of those symbols there. So, for example, now I could play that card there. Or I can also choose to play a card not on top of a stack, but underneath. Suppose that I just want to play that one. Maybe I'm not interested in the effect, although it looks pretty neat. But no, I'm not interested in the effect. I play it underneath, and so only the tag is visible. And so now when I take this action, I discard a card, and I can gain one of these symbols per symbols like that, or an infrastructure per, and so on and so forth. So, and then maybe later I really want to do something that that covers that. I'm looking for a card that will show you some of those things. Basically, a really good thing is that sometimes you put down a card, you resolve its action, and then you cover it right away. And so you, of the card that you just used the action, you still have the tag, which maybe triggers another awesome things. So that's the idea. Oh yeah, look at that. Suppose, for example, that I use this action here. I use the action itself, and then I play this card here, and then I use this action, which gives me one defense, one social defense token per file document right there. So that's the idea. So that's how. Oh, look at that. How about this one? Then I played this one on top there, because this one allows me, gives me that kind of defense token, and each round it does it once per pink file tag. So that would have been like a really nice chain of actions right there. Once you have done that, everybody has played their cards, now that's the bad stuff. You check the demand for electricity. If you don't have enough electricity here to cover the demand, then you get a number of community in crisis tokens equal to the difference. I suppose that now we're fine. After you check the demand, you add carbon to the board, and we talked about that. Add carbon up there. Absorb with those things. The leftover goes to the thermometer, and you may have to add bands. Then you have the crisis phase where you roll that die that affects those tracks, and finally you resolve those cards. The one that you know, and the other ones you flip them face up, and you see what horrible things they do to you. At that point, well, the round is almost over. Each player will increase their demand for energy, and the amount of steps for that depends on the player board that you have. Different player boards have different demands. And that's the general idea. You continue like this until either you're able to get to absorb all of your emissions, have like a positive effect, absorb all of them and have some extra resources available, and survive a crisis phase. Then you win the game. Any of the other situations that I described pretty much means that you will lose the game. Daybreak is an excellent game. The friends I played it with said that they would play this one over Pandemic any time, any day of the week. Now, this is not gonna replace Pandemic for me because they're different enough that I can definitely have both in my collection. But I see the point that you had the general idea of a cooperative game that in this case, well, first is a lot easier to set up and to put away and is more flexible in terms of gameplay. This has to be one of the most or the most flexible engine building game that I've ever seen. If you watch some of my videos, if you saw me talk about engine building games, my philosophy is that I like engine building games and I'm bored by engine operating games. There are games that when you create your engine, pretty much it reaches like a perfect optimal state and you'll just keep using it turn after turn, and then it becomes trivial, it becomes boring, it becomes repetitive. So I like games where you build the engine and you use it exactly once and then the game is over. Furnace would be a game like that. But here, well, the engine keeps changing from turn to turn and within a single turn, which gives you a lot of flexibility, a lot of options there. Which cards you're going to use for the tag or which ones for the action, sequencing them in a specific way can really magnify the advantages. You cover an action when you don't need it anymore. Maybe you have an action to phase out dirty energy and you don't have any of that anymore. So that's awesome that you're not stuck with that. It made me think of deck building games in which you have to do sometimes a lot of stuff to get rid of the weak cards that you had at the beginning when they're not useful anymore. Here it is so simple, so intuitive. You don't like an action, you cover it. Interesting enough, maybe later an action becomes valuable again. Maybe there's a penalty that makes you discard cards from your display, and then, well, you uncover, you reveal, you show an action again, and booyah, you have that action available again. This is a phenomenal implementation of the engine building idea. With so many other things, so many things that you can do with your cards, from contributing to the local projects, to the global projects, trying to mitigate the effects of the cards, of the crisis cards. You want to buy those tokens that defend you, because when the crisis start hitting, then you'll get a lot of communities in crisis and you may lose that, and you lose the game because of that. But if you get a lot of those, then you're not creating clean energy. And if you only create clean energy, you're not cleaning up your other emissions. If you're not reducing emissions, you're not planting enough trees or increasing the capacity of your oceans or adding some other technologies which you can do to the board. There's just a lot of stuff to do all the time, and it is not easy to do it all. So what you have here also when you play multiplayer is a game that does incentivize cooperation, but wait for it, does not really allow for quarterbacking. That is one of the things that everybody who has played Pandemic, at some point you have encountered that problem. Because the game requires cooperation, requires players to plan together, not everybody has the same skills, and it is entirely possible for somebody to have enough experience and cognitive ability there to quarterback the experience for everybody. For newer players, it becomes unpleasant. A lot harder here because there are just so many tiny effects, so many lines of text all over the board, maybe facing different directions. And the cards change all the time, the engines change all the time. You're mainly gonna play your display, which you know very well, you know better than everybody, and you communicate, say, hey, can somebody give me a certain kind of tokens? Does somebody have an ability? Some abilities will allow players to give resources to one another. Hey, can you give me some shields of a certain kind? I need a card with that tag. So it definitely gives value to cooperation and exchanging of resources and help, but without quarterbacking. That is significant. That is what I believe a cooperative game should be. If you play it solo, well, it's just you against the board, and then it becomes more of a puzzle, but still with a push or luck element, because there's still the element of what the crisis cards are going to do and what kind of cards you get from the deck. And so, well, you're trying to handle and manage that. and I played the game solo, and I find it, well, pretty challenging to beat. Speaking about the difficulty, the game comes with multiple sets of cards that you can use to modify the game, make it easy, make it easier, make it harder. So you're not gonna have any problem to tweak the challenge level of the game to your liking, which is awesome. Now, one thing that I'm a little bit have mixed feelings about is this. As you start receiving communities in crisis, the penalty that you have is a penalty on the number of cards that you draw, which means less agency. I prefer when a game gives me a penalty, and the purpose of the penalty is to make it harder to win. I get that. But I prefer penalties that make it harder for me to win, but do not reduce my agency. And there may be turns that felt a bit, there were turns that felt a bit anticlimactic because I was only drawing fewer cards, and maybe they were not cards that really were synergized or would do anything useful with my engine. And so some turns felt a little underwhelming. But that is such a small negative in a game that otherwise has just so many other positive elements. You have great components. I really love everything is in cardboard, paper, cardstock, wood, everything. Well, looks very natural, and the colors are not particularly strong, but they're vibrant and they really come together. They're peaceful and beautiful. Love the production. Love, of course, gameplay more than anything. That's why we play games. I love the interactions. I love the flexibility in the difficulty that you can set. I love the lack of quarterbacking, and I love the solo experience also. So maybe I'll come up with a variant that, the penalties that prevent you from drawing a card, I'll figure out something else. Maybe roll the crisis die once more. Maybe discard cards from my tableau instead of not drawing them. Things like that. But in general, Daybreak is a truly excellent, truly remarkable game. And given the topic, it is a very important game also.